What's up, theology nerds? This is Tripp. And today on the Homebrewed Christianity podcast, you're getting a special treat because the one and only Trey Pearson is returning to the podcast. And here's the thing. I recorded this last week before Trey Pearson exploded on the internet. Trey, friend of mine, Everday Sunday, been on the podcast before, Christian rocker. Well, he decided to come out publicly to all of his fans and tell the story. And it went from, some stuff on the internet to like being on The View. And he's going to be playing in just a week or so in San Diego at Pride Fest. He's going to be a Wild Goose festival with me in July, and we're going to have a battle, but I'll talk about it in the podcast. But anyway, in this conversation with Trey, we talked about his own journey, faith journey with wrestling with doubt and questions and all that kind of good stuff. And he tells about the process of recognizing and coming to understand himself as a gay man and what that is like as a evangelical, a musician, a husband, father. And so it's a real powerful thing. It's not the most nerdy podcast in the world, but it is one that's packed full of someone's journey who's been listening to the podcast for a long time. You've got to meet. And I hope you listen, you enjoy it, and let Trey know, Facebook, Twitter, or however you do that you appreciated it. Or you can come hang out with us at Wild Goose Festival, because he's gonna be there, and we're gonna have some fun. And I'm gonna look forward to seeing you there. And you can use the code Goosecast 2016, get 25% off your tickets. Wild Goose Festival in North Carolina this July. Later in July, I'll be in Canada, Vancouver, Canada, doing some stuff up there. So if you're interested, go to Homebrewed. Check out the info. If you're doing a book group, namely one talking about my book about Jesus, the Homebrewed Christianity Guide to Jesus, and you want me to Skype in and do some Q&A, answer questions, and chat it up with your group, just let me know. You help me out getting peeps to read my book and talk about it. Maybe leave amazing reviews on Amazon. Or leaving amazing reviews for the podcast on iTunes. Do stuff like that. Then I'll Skype in, and you can be like the minister who got the author to Skype in. And you can even give me a heads up. Like, I have no problem helping you out if you help me out. And it's all around theological goodness. And if you've heard about the book and all this kind of stuff, but you hadn't got it yet, and here's the thing. If you text freaking awesome with no space, just one word, freaking awesome, to the number 44222. That's right, freaking awesome, to 44222. You'll get the first chapter of my book sent to you. And it's awesome. It's actually, I just found out that Catherine Keller is going to use my book in her intro to systematic theology in the fall. Yes, I didn't even know that was possible for that to be that awesome. And then I was talking to Sally McFay, like the Sally McFay, and she's like, I've just been reading your book, and it is very good. She said positive things about it. And I tried not to act like I was a giddy, like I felt like the excitement I had when I was in 8th grade. No, probably is younger than that. Like 5th grade. And I was at that Carmen concert. When he got out, the actors, and they did the Western song, The Champion. Maybe it was even younger than that. I don't know. I just remember seeing that song acted out. And if you don't know what Carmen the Champion is, I'm sorry. Google it on the internet or YouTube and watch the video in its entirety. And there's a moment where Satan, after he's beat by Jesus in a boxing match, counts backwards. But nonetheless, if you text freaking awesome without a space to 44222, you'll get the first chapter. That's awesome. I love this little texty thing. I hope you like it. I'm going to be trying it out for a bit. All right. Last but not least, June 15th, webinar. And we're going to talk about labor and faith, how they can get combined, make transformations up in this piece meaning the world. Jorg and Rosemary Rieger are joining. We're going to have an amazing time on June 15th. Sign up. You'll get the live stream invite, and you'll get a replay sent to you. And if you don't do that, you won't get it. So do it. Because if you come, I can't tell you this right now, but there may or may not be some really sweet free stuff for you. Yeah. Also, on the 20th of July, Kyle Roberts and I are doing another free webinar called Facebook to the Pulpit. during doing some election year theologizing. So go to the website. You can find out details about that and join on. So here we go. Here we go. Me and Trey talking it up before he hit it big time. Now I don't even know if he'll come on the podcast again. It looks, well, he's already going to have to do it at Wild Goose because he said it. But now he's just like cool and famous and people on The View talking about him, and he's like pioneering, creating space for people. And that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm just so excited, and I should have put the podcast out faster, I guess. I should have. The video of this conversation is on the YouTube page. So if you go to my YouTube page for Tripp Fuller, you can watch us have this conversation on the YouTube page. You should go there and give it some thumbs up, because there are like a lot of fundamentalist Christians that just went to my YouTube page. It's like already had like 5,000 views or something, and they just keep pushing negative, like thumbs down. And I don't know. I've deleted a bunch of comments because I didn't even know people could say stuff like that. I don't know. I didn't. Yeah. And I think they think they're Christians. But I just feel like there's certain things you shouldn't say about human beings in public, on the internet, where it just kind of stays forever on behalf of Jesus. You know, that's my theory. But I'm also the one that said in my book that if God's not at least as nice as Jesus, it shouldn't be called a Christian understanding of God. So that's how it is. All right. Here's Trey. And Trey, thanks. I've loved getting to be your friend. And I still love getting to be your friend. I love you, your family, and your kids. They're all awesome. And I'll be praying for you, continuing supporting you in whatever way I can do that. So, for those who have ears, which I hope you do because it's a podcast, here's a convo. Hello, Homebrewed Christianity listeners. This is Tripp, and Trey Pearson's on the podcast again. So, he hasn't broke up with me yet. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Tripp?
Oh, well, since I get to talk to one of my cool friends, I'm just like feeling better about myself.
Me too. I'm feeling better about yourself.
Oh, that's so good. Look at this. My shirt, I mean, it's a t-shirt, except it has a pocket with a zipper on it.
It's almost like that's your rock star shirt you wear when you're around me.
Yeah. I got a zipper shirt. It makes my t-shirt not a t-shirt. Now I feel cool. Gosh. That's what I'm talking about. Well, if you put anything in a t-shirt with a pocket, it's just going to be like a giant lump right on your chest. So I don't know what you would stick in it. Maybe like one piece of paper, a Post-it. Anything else, it's just going to be lumpy.
Maybe a fruit snack.
Yeah.
No?
Like we have a lot of Star Wars themed fruit snacks in my house.
I'll give you like a third nipple up there.
Oh, like the lady who reads fortunes and mall rats.
Oh, man.
But you were in youth group then, so you didn't watch worldly movies.
I wasn't allowed.
Anyway.
You think that's funny?
What?
I said, you think that's funny?
Well, everyone has things to go to therapist about. So it's been a while since you were on the podcast, and for people who don't know you previously from previous episodes, why don't you just give us a little introduction to yourself?
Sure. Well, my name's Trey. I started a band called Everday Sunday when I was 16 and signed a record deal not too long out of high school. I've toured full time for a lot of years now. I've been in all 50 states and 20 countries, and I've had a decent amount of success in that world. I've had 5 number 1 U.S. singles, 15 top 10s, and left my label a few years ago, but I've continued to tour full time and release a couple independent projects, mostly as Everday Sunday. And then I also did a side project last year with a friend called Populous.
Mm-hmm. And I know, like, the first time we got to hang out, I don't know if this has been on the podcast, but if you get like a email from Rob Bell that's like, meet Trey, meet Tripp, Tripp, meet Trey, y'all should hang out. Then kind of say yes. That's like life rules. Is like when Rob is insisting you meet someone.
Always say yes to Rob.
Well, no, that's meeting someone. Like I figure he's like a matchmaker for theological questioning types.
Yeah, no. We got coffee down in your turf, Redondo Beach, right?
Yes.
And I was so nervous to meet you because I'd been nerding out on your podcast a little bit leading up to meeting you. And between him and my friend Bo Eberly, we ended up hanging out. And not too long after that, you invited me to come to Wild Goose Festival to share my story at that time. At least my story up to that point.
Yeah. Well, on behalf of Satan, I like to corrupt people on a consistent basis.
Oh my God.
I like to invite them into images of God, where God's at least as loving as Jesus, where they can think critically and faithfully at the same time, where even someone with as high a sanitation grade and use of hair product that you could go camping with the least of these who don't know how to use hair product or sanitation. And we went to Wild Goose, and what was it, 2 or 3 years ago? It was the first time, right?
You know what? I want to say it was almost 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Anyway,
I think so.
Well, if you're like saying to yourself, what's a Wild Goose? It's like a religion, faith, spirituality, arts, music festival in the mountains of North Carolina. And you should go because I'm going to be there and doing a bunch of stuff. Trey's going to be there. And we may or may not, during the Homebrewed Christianity podcast, have a sing-off. And I'm already like, should I even try to sing? Because with my dance moves already in my back pocket, Trey has no chance. But I might sing and dance, which will just like you may as well tap out now, Trey. But you can use Goosecast 2016, and then you'll get 25% off the ticket. Goosecast 2016, and then they get 25% off their ticket to come watch me demolish you in a sing off and such. But you'll also
hang out with us at the beer tent.
Yes, and I know how to beer and hymns like a champ. It's one of my spiritual gifts. I'm working on it. Other things I do is I let people buy me drinks. So
oh my God!
You said to yourself, "I want to buy Tripp a drink and talk to him about X, Y, or Z." As long as it's a theological topic, there's a high chance that I'll say yes. That's I figure it's letting people like just being hospitable. That's what I'm doing.
Oh God!
So when we first met, and you're going to Wild Goose, you grew up conservative Wesleyan in Ohio. So what were those kind of like first questions that made you step out of your theological comfort zone?
Actually, it's even more intense than that. If you remember, I actually grew up Calvinist.
Oh yeah, I just try to block that out about friends.
And then I got invited to a Wesleyan church at the age of 14 to a youth group. And so, the kind of stuff I was dealing with as a teenager was that theological, like, predestination versus free will sort of thing. So even having to think about sort of John Wesley's thoughts on God and, thinking about the Wesleyan quadrilateral and how that compared to Calvinism, that had made me step out and try to start to figure out deep theological questions at a very young age. But even before then, growing up in a Calvinistic home, I was struggling with what I was taught to believe and really wanting to believe what I was handed and really trying to study the Bible. I mean, I think, as a teenager, I read the Bible front to back 6 times before, and that's not even including the million times you read, your whatever same passages over and over. But I think I was always kind of on a journey, but as a young adult, it continued, and Rob Bell would put out these Pneuma videos, if any of you remember that. that would really strike me in this new, refreshing way that I hadn't heard in a long time, when a lot of what I was hearing would feel stale a lot of the time in the world that I came from. And so I got super into Rob, and he released his first book, Velvet Elvis, and that rocked my world. It scared me, to be honest. There were things in it that I was like, ooh, I don't know what I think about that. And I've read that book a lot of times since then, and he quickly became my favorite author. But yeah, I would say like he definitely was sort of that gateway drug to helping me kind of go on this path of resurfacing a lot of questions I had as a kid, and really kind of thinking about them hopefully in a more intelligent way as an adult. But I would say that was kind of the trajectory I was on, from Calvinist to Wesleyan to Bellian. I don't know, but
I think he should call. I mean, now to go from two of the most influential figures of all church history to a Bellian, a Calvinist, a Wesleyan, they're like major figures, and so I told Rob he has not adopted this yet. That people that are really into him should not be like a Bellist or
a Bellist.
No, you shouldn't be a Bellist or like a Bellarista, because most people read his books while they were at a coffee shop. Boom!
Oh my God! I don't know if that's gonna stick, Tripp.
I'm just. It was free marketing advice. He needs it. Like I always tell him, you are not Bob. You should really ask me what to do. You should have long conversations with philosophical theologians. You'll reach a whole new audience. One of the things that the number of conversations I have with people through the podcast who a lot of times are ministers at evangelical churches who, like you, or leaders in different parts of the church, like have a real vibrant faith. It inspires them to act, to respond to a call vocationally, be it music and within the church, or as a missionary, or as a like nonprofit leader addressing something Jesus told them to say, or minister. The number of people who begin conversations when they reach out to me that start like that are so high. And so this is Tripp's theory off just talking to them. But one of the things I've noticed when people kind of have a vocation they've chosen that's intimately connected to their faith, and then they get to a point where questions they kind of closed off from their time growing up all get reopened at the same time, is they get stuck in this position where there's nothing about the questions that are antithetical to their actual relationship with God and Jesus.
Right.
Like that's there, and it's like it's pulsing, and yet at the same time they have this ghost or something in the back of their head that's like, do not let the blood pump to that arm, or like close this part of you off. And yet at the same time you're like, wait, there's this whole new dimension of existence that like I feel like the heart of Christ pumping blood into that part of my body. And why do I have this conundrum? And it's not like the way I hear it described to me regularly when they're telling it autobiographically, it's not like they sit down and are like, I got to really look at quantum notions of block time and see what that relates to notions of causality and how that would help untangle 17th century Calvinist articulations of, or whatever. Like, it's not that at all. It's this, their relationship with God. Eventually there's like a dam that broke, and this stuff that was off the table's on the table, but God was never off the table.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't know that it's a ghost that holds us back. I think it's this thing that we are, so many of us are taught in the church growing up, don't ask these questions. And there's almost this fear that is instilled into us. And so to unlearn that, like to unlearn anything unhealthy in your life is tough to do sometimes. But yeah, I mean, it's beautiful once that dam does break and all of a sudden you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm allowed to ask this question. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like nothing bad is going to happen. God's not even mad at me for asking this question, And so, that was definitely a very, freeing place to come to. Man, I don't even know how long ago that started to happen for me. But, I mean, it was definitely building toward that as Velvet Elvis came out. But I would say that was kind of the turning point of what set me on a new path and kind of set me into listening to things like the Homebrewed Christianity podcast and, reading so many books, starting with things like N.T. Wright and Dallas Willard and, I guess learning from you about process theology and learning about, just different things from Richard Rohr, Frederick Buechner, and some different things on that side. It definitely felt like this thing that I couldn't turn back once I saw it. Once I started seeing it, you can't unsee it. So, it's been a journey up to this point, which I'm super thankful for, and I think it's why it's gotten me where I am.
So when you go into a period where, like, not your faith is in flux, but at least your location for your faith is in flux, or like the assumptions you have to share to be involved in certain communities or certain rooms, that is something ministers feel all the time, right? Like when you have so I'm friends with these 5 megachurch ministers in Los Angeles who are all like, at this point, they're open and affirming and are trying to figure out how to say it at a congregation and get people to be able to understand it. And they don't even know how that works. Like that in being a part of those conversations, I feel like that's a situation where people are constantly trapped, where because of your love and your faith and your service, you get in a situation where then people expect you to believe all this stuff for them and not even have a living faith anymore. You have to perform this, as opposed to
Sometimes we live in this fear where it's like you're kind of scared to go there and you don't want to think too much about it. So it's almost easier to have somebody that you're willing to kind of call your pastor or some sort of leader in your life, or whether it's a family leader, religious leader, whatever, sort of tell you what to think and just kind of tell you, yeah, I studied it, trust me. And that's easier than having to actually dig into it yourself and really think about why you actually think those things.
So what has this process meant then, like in your own, be it your faith community that you come from, because you still remained in Columbus and stuff, and also as an artist, I know that you've struggled trying to understand your Christian faith as a Christian artist and musician.
Yeah. It's been really good in a lot of ways. I think even since the first time I was on your podcast, almost 4 years ago, I've gotten so many people that have talked to me that either listen to the podcast because they saw me post about it and they're like, oh my gosh, it feels so good to hear somebody else is on a similar journey as me, or hearing people that listen to your podcast that hadn't even, and some of them had actually been Everday Sunday fans before, and to hear that like an artist in that sort of subculture of Christian music or kind of the evangelical world, that somebody that was known in that world was on a similar journey to them. I just had so many encouraging stories, and like feeling like, not like I definitely didn't have and still don't have all the answers, but just like to know that we were on a journey together and feeling like we were in it together. It's meant a lot to a lot of people. It also scares a lot of people. It's, I think maybe gotten people that sort of live in that world fearful of me or frustrated with me. I don't really know why, but I think that's been interesting to see as well. And it does sometimes feel lonely, like just even being able to come to affirm other people in a public way in the last few years has been kind of almost lonely within the church context sometimes, because there are some beautiful churches out there around the world that are affirming and making a huge difference. But there's a lot of cities like mine where it was really hard to find that at first. And I think that's definitely something that's kind of in progress right now. And it is very interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm. So, in the 614 article, or is that 614 article? My
area code.
Well, there you go. So, in it describes this kind of interaction, I guess, with the editor or whatever, with the newspaper or journal, happening while Ubering. So, describe. That sets up this situation where you, because of your own faith journey, have less and less places in the church to do what you've always done. Be it like tour gets canceled, or partners, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I went through a very, difficult time this last fall. For those listening that aren't familiar with the article, we're talking about magazine just broke, talking about kind of this transition in my life, and about 7 months ago, I came to a place in my life where I realized that I couldn't keep living the way I was living, and to be super honest and clear, I just came to the point where I knew I needed to get help because, I guess it's kind of hard to figure out the easiest way to just say it, but I came to a point this last fall where I was able to admit to myself and to my family that I was gay. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I did go through a bit of a time where I had to cancel a tour, and I ended up driving for Uber for a while to help make some extra money to make up for that tour, because I was married to a girl and I have 2 kids, and have a lot of responsibilities to fulfill, and so that was a time in my life that I needed to do something to kind of come through and provide for my family. And it's kind of humbling when you've been touring full time for your entire adulthood to go out and do something like that. But that's what led to meeting the editor of 614 magazine, and that has kind of just been great to have him and so many people that have wanted to come to my side to support me through this and help me tell my story.
So in the process of that kind of self-discovery, what was the turning point where honesty wasn't something you ran from but ran to? What was it that made you think you have permission to go there?
I felt like I didn't have a choice. I felt like I was put into a position where I felt like I could either run, even though I knew I couldn't be what my wife needed me to be as her husband. Mm-hmm. And I could just, I could run and keep ignoring it, keep trying to pawn it off on other things of why I wasn't able to be that, or I was able to take that moment, which I felt like was really a huge moment for me to just say, I think I need to get help. And so, at the time, I'm not really sure why I did it this way, but I was almost not sure who even to talk to. And obviously you and I have become very close over the last several years, and you've been a huge help to me through this whole process. But at the time, my friend Jonathan Martin had reached out to me kind of randomly, seeing how I was, and I was in the middle of trying to make this big decision. And for those of you who don't know Jonathan Martin, he's an awesome pastor, author, blogger, whatever. And I just decided to, he had told me some of his journey that he was going through himself. And I decided to break down and tell him everything I was going through. And so I quickly then, he was able to help me get with a therapist and counselor that was able to start working with me and very understanding and sensitive to the situation of what I was going through, and started working with me and Lauren. And it's kind of, that was the tipping point. But it was just coming to this realization that I couldn't keep trying to bury what I had always been scared of deep down my whole life, and I knew that I wanted to be free, and I knew that I wanted Lauren to be free. And to be honest, I always thought pushing it down was the best thing for me and my family. And I finally realized in that moment that it wasn't working. And the only thing that was going to help any of this was for me to get healthy for myself. That way I could be healthy for Lauren and for my kids and for the people around me.
So one of the things that immediately sticks out, and I mean, I think almost everyone would agree until you're in the situation, right? Like, you decide to talk and be honest with a friend, and your version of the story includes him saying nothing about a Bible verse or theology or fixing what you said. It was a human being who just gave a shit, right? I mean, it's not shocking given just, I don't know, Jesus, that would be like the best thing to do. But I know that so many people, regardless of where you are on the issue around sexuality, it's hard when you, or at least as a straight person, to engage in that conversation and just treat the human being's experience as the beginning spot rather than some conclusion that honestly is about something you don't have an experience of. If you're a straight person, like, you have no idea what asking those questions looks like because they're not existential. And and I mean, I think that's like an important thing to pause, because I know in the article you mentioned that's not always how Christians respond, but it is being that type of person where people decide to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think I knew just from other people's stories how this could go one way or another, and I was definitely very nervous to talk to people about it. It's such a huge, sensitive thing. And as I did start to slowly come out to myself, and then to my family, and then slowly to other friends and things like that, I knew that there would be some people that wouldn't react in the most kind way. And so, fortunately, most people have been pretty amazing to me. But yeah, you're right. There are some people that have, like, the first thing they wanted to talk about was not my experience or how hard it had been or the reality of the situation, but they still want to keep it as some kind of topic that isn't personal. It's just like this topic out there, and as if, well, this is what how do you deal with that with what the Bible says? And, like, don't get me wrong, I'm happy to talk about that, but that's not the first thing I want to talk about when I tell you what has happened in my life. In the sense of, like, this is not some thing that we're talking about a belief, it's like, it's not like what we're talking about, what happens when you die, or something that doesn't affect us right now personally, or affect the reality of the situation that we're in this second.
It's not even what you would do as a minister or a Christian. I think if someone was like, oh, I cheated on my partner, or I murdered someone, or I was abused, or anything, whether you're guilty or not on something, when something big comes up, I lost my job. Well, why did you? I mean, like, the type of follow-ups aren't there for so many things that it's like part of being in a faith community is like doing prayers of confession every week, and like being a community with people you wouldn't like choose to hang out with otherwise, and trying to figure out how to support and welcome people. So many things, all that we would naturally do as people of faith, just get chucked out the window around particular issues, depending on the part of the church you're from. And
Right.
one of the things that struck me, and if I can't remember what we've talked about previously when you've been on the podcast, but over the course of our friendship, you've come out a bunch of times and hung out with our family, and your whole family has. So when you call to talk to me about, having just come out to your family and stuff, that wasn't like in a vacuum, where it's like, oh, I'm friends with Trey, so I'm being supportive. Immediately it goes to knowing your wife and both your kids, and thinking y'all are all awesome and have blessed the Fuller family. So when you told the story, I was basically in awe of how your wife responded. So and I remember you like saying, as much as painful and stuff that's going on, like you couldn't imagine having a better best friend there at the moment. So can you describe what it's like to, I don't know, in a sense, come out to people who are wonderfully gracious, but also in fear, shock, freaking out like anyone would, I think, in that situation? Like, what's that? How does that, I don't know, describe that experience?
Yeah. I mean, I was so scared. I was so scared of like how she was going to react, and what she would think of me, and if she would still love me, and all those things that, I mean, telling this to the person that you love with all your heart, that you've committed your life to, that you have a family with, it's the scariest thing you could ever do. And she also knew how difficult of a journey it had been for us up to that point. But I think how grateful I am that she's been on this spiritual journey with me over the last several years. As we talk about, our entire marriage, we were married 7.5 years, and kind of at the beginning of that marriage is when I had met Rob, and we had become friends and started hanging out, and he had kind of been helping me a ton. And as we gotten to know you guys and have come out and visited you and stayed at your home, and as she's kind of been on this journey with me, and she's come to be able to accept and affirm other people just like I have, I can't even begin to describe how thankful I am for that, because I know how much of a difference it has helped both of us to handle this now. And so when I did tell her, I wrote out a letter and I read it out loud to her. And when I told her and I got done, all she did was hug me and cried and told me how proud of me she was for being able to be honest with myself. And I knew at that moment, I knew I'd been set free. I knew I was going to be okay. And it didn't matter what anyone else thought, how anyone else treated me. I just knew right then, that second, I was going to be okay. And I'm so grateful to you, to Rob, to Christian, to so many people in my life that have been able to help me progress so much in my faith, to be able to handle it the way that we have through this. And it's really crazy to think about almost how it had been set up to allow us to be able to process this in the healthiest way possible that we did. And I'm unbelievably grateful for that.
If you were, going back in time and hearing this type of conversation with someone else and trying to decide like whether or not, okay, well, maybe the Bible's not perfectly condemning of same-sex relations, or inside you're dealing with like your personal questions, your religious questions and stuff. What were the questions that would pop in your head as like defense mechanisms, or like, well, I have to deal with this first? Or I guess I can think of with a family and things, people going, oh, well, you already married, so you should, or you have kids, or do you really? What was it like trying to go through this process, which I know is difficult for teenagers in the church, or college students when I was a campus minister, let alone a public Christian figure with a family.
Yeah. I don't know. Are you asking what I would think if I had heard somebody else say it, or were you asking?
Like if you think back to like, I think there's a sense where a lot of times before we make a transition, we make the transition in our head, and so we think it through, deal with certain things. How would you deal with this? And unconsciously, we're shifting levers and things. Before we can go all the way. But once you go there, you've kind of realized you have been processing and working on it for a while. Well, I just feel like there's a lot of people who, when they hear you share your story, like there'll be echoes in them. And it could be unrelated to your sexuality, but lots of people echoes going, have I had this cement version of faith locked in where this whole depth of faith is possible for me that I've just been closing myself off to? And what is it that starts, what were those kind of deterrents or defense mechanisms or type things that you would come up when you would hear it?
I think a lot of it was just being able to admit to myself that I had these beliefs that I didn't completely know why I believed them, or I knew that there was still a lot of information missing in my own argument for defending that belief. So my point is, like, for example, not even in like when we talk about issues of sexuality like this, but the first time I read not Love Wins, Velvet Elvis by Rob Bell, when I said it scared me almost the first time I read it, because there were things in it that felt so freeing and like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense, but almost scared me, because then he would say things like, well, I don't remember if he was asked the question or how he stated it, but like, what if the virgin birth wasn't true in the way that we think of it as true? What if it didn't happen? Like, what if you found that out? Would that like rock your entire belief in Jesus and your faith in Jesus? Or would you still be able to believe the stories? And like the first time I read that, I was just almost like, it scared me. I was appalled. And really just the reason for being appalled is because it scared me. And he started to talk about faith in that book, like springs on a trampoline, how like it doesn't have to shake your whole world, and it doesn't have to be anything as maybe extreme in your own faith, if that's where you are, of something like the virgin birth. But maybe it's what you understand about sexuality, or what you understand about divorce, or what you understand about for different churches today, it's what you understand about women speaking in the church, and what if you find out that thing that you were taught, you were handed, that you thought you had to believe isn't true? Does it have to rock your whole world, and can you see it in a different way? And so even though my defense mechanism was being almost appalled, and I see people do that all the time with all kinds of different theological beliefs, it started to turn in my mind, oh my gosh, there's a lot I really need to figure out about what I think about this, or why I think about this, and why I'm so adamant about it. And not even that I have to know what I think about it, but can I not know? Is that okay? Is it okay if I can admit I don't know what I think about this? And And that's kind of been a journey of mine through all sorts of faith issues for my entire life. And I would think a lot of people, you know, I don't know how many people believe the exact same thing they did 10 years ago, but I would guess that most people don't. And at first those things scare us. And then we find that freedom in being able to work through those questions.
Well, and I think part of it is whatever the issue is that comes up first for people, in the stages of faith, there is a transition from faith as being primarily assent to some fact or something, where what do you have faith in? Is this like this objective reality of X or something, be it virgin conception of Jesus or Matthew's resurrection narrative, or I don't know, whatever the thing is. And there's a transition to other depths of faith where you have like faith. And this is, I think, how Paul talks about it most of the time, is being grasped by God or being seized by God. And that's like at a guttural level, not like I assent to this being true, or I believe this, but to have been grasped by faith, to have been given a new identity. And there's that kind of existential dimension. And the other side of it is like giving, and this is what Wesley emphasized, is the faith has to do with fidelity, of giving yourself to God. That's why the whole story of sanctification that he emphasized is connected to faith, because faith is something you work out. Like you learn how to be faithful to your partner. Why? Because that's what love does. Like it's not works righteousness or anything that's negative. When you give yourself to caring for someone, then you figure out what it's like to love them. And I think there's a sense that people fear when God becomes something other than an object that they have as like a security blanket to protect them from whatever, the world, finitude, hell, I don't know. But the thing is, like, all the people we care most about are never just objects. Like, we have ideas of who Tripp is and who Trey is. Like, in your head is there, oh, there's Tripp. So I have my idea of Tripp and I'm talking to him on the video. And I have my idea of Trey and I'm talking to him on the video. But
sure.
But we remain human to each other by having those objects in our mind basically function to keep the actual real relationship in our mind with each other as subjects. We remain having a genuine relationship because we keep each other as mysteries. Like, you and I remain a mystery to each other, and it doesn't mean we don't come to know each other better or that we don't love each other deeply or anything. It's just that it's each other as the subject addressing the other, where genuine friendship and love develops. And I think that a lot of times people receive the stories or beliefs from their faith, and they think that's what they have faith in, and it's not what like is running in the ark. Or
right.
Or let's say we're sitting there and we're looking forward to Michael Jackson concert or something, and a limo rolls up, Michael Jackson gets out, and we're all excited. We're like, okay, we're going to go Michael Jackson. Well, and he gets out and he goes in to go to the concert. I think a lot of Christians are still sitting outside looking at the limo going, that is Michael Jackson's limo. Look at the limo that the kingdom is in that piece. You're like, actually, he went in. He's doing a concert right now. Would you like to go experience it? It's gonna be awesome. Like, no. Have you seen Michael Jackson's limo? And like, it's like James 16:11 or whatever your belief doctrine or something. And you're like, oh, no. Jesus professionally doesn't answer theology questions, I think, to avoid this problem. Right? Like, he asked hundreds of questions. He answers like 2 of them, and it's to piss rich people off who don't help the poor. All the other, he's just like, I don't know. Let me tell you a story, and Christians will argue about it forever. Or, why don't you come follow me, and then you can figure it out. Or, I don't know. You know the greatest, you know the good commandment. You should do them more. Like, he just refuses to answer people's questions and insists that they become a part of the community that does what Jesus does. And I mean, he literally promised to be 3 places, like in the other, in Matthew 25, among the least of these in whatever way, in community, especially ones where you confess your sins to each other, and at the table. Like, that's it. That's where Jesus is like, I'm going to show up. This is just out of the New Testament. It's going to be like in the community where we're being honest and vulnerable with each other, when you're meeting people's needs and when you're caring for other people. And if you go about doing that all the time, your theology won't suck as bad. But instead, we think to protect, like we're like really into the limo or really into the ideas. And Jesus is like, have you seen you should probably go to the concert. Like, I was hoping for you not to live life scared of what's going to happen later, but to live it deeply right now. And the cosmos is throwing a really sweet concert. And like, if you skip a Michael Jackson concert, you're a loser. So.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think that's the issue, like, as I talk to people and, like, I think some people are, like, because I think people are almost even torn in how they know me as a human being and what they think objectively or whatever about some topic of who I am. When they're with me, they remember, oh yeah, it's just Trey, and I love him, and I know God loves him, and he loves God, and everything like that. But then when they start thinking in weird other terms, like, that's when it gets messy. And I think that's like when Jesus is asked what was the most important commandment, he says, love your neighbor as yourself. And in doing that, you're loving God. Thinking objectively about all this stuff that's fun and it's interesting. And it does matter because if you don't think loving your neighbor and serving the poor and helping the oppressed, if those aren't the most important objective things, it's going to affect how you treat the person that you should be loving. And, but I guess that all comes back to, it's funny how you can either simply accept I should love my neighbor and that's the most important thing and I don't need to get caught up in all this stuff. Or as we do get caught up in all these ideas, it's always hopefully to come back to just loving our neighbor and loving each other and seeing God in that.
Well, and I think a lot of the intensities happening in the church is really us arguing over the "who is your neighbor" question, and I mean, Jesus straight up doozies that one when you try to get out of it. Well, who is my neighbor? And then just in case it wasn't clear, Jesus is like, oh yeah, and love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, and I'm even going to forgive the people nailing me on the cross in case there's any ambiguity as to how I roll.
And today, we still want to argue over that as to whether, I love when you say God has to at least be as nice as Jesus, because sometimes I think we think, oh, well, we should love our enemies, but God doesn't love our enemies, like as if somehow we could love people more than God does. And I mean, that's the same idea of like, well, what do we really want to believe about who this God is? Like, do we really believe we can love people more than God can? Like, the people that love me for, even though I'm gay, like, do you really think you're able to love me more than God is able to?
What's amazing is why I would hope not. I really feel like as a human being, if you thought you could love someone better than God does, then you have a very high view of yourself.
And a very low view of God.
I know. And well, what do you think? What do you think or how would you like people to hear? Like, what if this is the first time they've had an encounter with someone they know that was a part of their faith? They were like, when I was in youth group, I rocked out to Everday Sunday tunes. And like, wake up. And then, and then they're listening to this conversation or reading the article or seeing stuff online. And what's the response for someone who this is the first time this conversation wasn't just closed at the beginning? Like, what's the hospitable first step instead of going, all right, I am full on board with everything Trey's saying, and now I'm just like a gay rights activist, and like, what's the hospitable listening from people that don't know what to do?
That's a good question. I think I think it would just be to say, are you willing to dig deeper into this, to try to understand deeper? I think about the power of story and, why Jesus always told stories, why so many stories have affected me and helped me through what I'm getting through. And that's why I feel like it's so important to tell my story and to talk about it, because I realize how other people's stories have helped me get to this point and to get through what I'm getting through. So the first place is just, if you're listening to this podcast or if you're listening to any of these conversations, that's at least a good start, because you're hearing somebody else's story of what they're going through. But, I think there's so much out there that we try to hide ourselves from sometimes because we're scared of the truth. And so, like, for example, I was talking to a guy here in Columbus not too long ago. I was sharing him with what I had been through, and he was talking to me. He's like, you know what? He's like, very sympathetic and everything like that. He's like, but I came out to my parents when I was 18. My dad was a preacher, and 2 weeks after I came out to my father, he committed suicide and left me a letter condemning me to hell. And my heart was just, as hard as everything I have been through has been extremely hard to get to this place. I was just crushed by his story and what he was going through. And I realized this is a huge deal. This is a huge deal because of how it affects families. It affects us, like, people like me who grow up thinking you cannot be who you are. You will not be loved. You will be looked at differently. And so, I would say hear people's stories. If this is the first story you're hearing like this, go get to know some gay people. Don't hide in a bubble, because as you find out the truth of how these experiences are, it's like what you're saying. Don't start with some lofty idea and figure out how to tell me who I should be from there. Listen to the experiences and figure out, what does that mean in the context of what I have been taught, in the context of what I thought this meant. And I guess, that, at least that's my first thought. But honestly, I don't know that I have all the answers. If I did, I would be telling everyone that's still having a hard time accepting who I am.
Well, and I don't think you have to have all the answers. I just think that there's ways of, you can listen and not be where someone is, and still avoid going on Facebook tirades and all sorts of like ways where you could disagree with someone without being a jerk about it, and also give people the dignity of listening. And listening doesn't mean assent to whatever someone's saying.
Sure.
And the other challenge the church has, I think, are for more progressive Christians, where this is not anything people have lost sleep about in a long time. Like if you're part of more progressive Christian circles, same-sex relations could be a rather settled thing, and you are regularly frustrated for your more evangelical friends, the way they handle it. And as someone who has hung out with me at a number of different things where more progressive Christians are around and things, and may not understand all that is involved in, like, the courage it takes someone like you to come out, or the fear that could be in many Christians who, like, you're in Columbus, which is a pretty big city, and it's not like it was like, oh, look at all these options I have as like a young gay man with children about where I can go to church. Like, the church is not wonderfully helpful at going, you know what?
Right.
It's already difficult enough to be human, so let's just not have your sexuality be a topic on whether or not you get to be here in our congregation. So, like, what kind of things or what kind of insights could you give for people, probably on the coast in bigger cities where this is just not something they look at it and they normally go, oh, look at these backwards Bible thumpers. Oh, you just tell the truth and be free and like, don't be an ignoramus. Like,
right.
Describe what it's really like for large numbers of people in the body of Christ today wrestling with this issue.
I would say, I guess just having compassion for what people were raised with, understanding, that we all have our issues that we're dealing with, but this is still a huge issue in our country that, you got to think it just got legalized to get married in every state in our country. Like that's a pretty recent history, And so then take that a step further of all the people that were fighting, allowing that to even happen. There's still churches and religious, and it's not just a religious thing. It is it's not just the United States that this is an issue. Like, I talk to Indian people all the time that tell me in India, even if you're gay, you're still expected to get married to a woman, and then unfortunately they are trying to work through that in their own culture, in their own way, and it's not too different than what Christians, how Christians are handling it, And so I think, that has caused me to think a lot about just, even as we read the context of what we see in these scriptures, the way the Indian culture is handling it today is not too different than the way it was handled within the culture of the time of the writers and the very few passages that there are talking about any kind of same-sex relationships back then. Up till this point, which it is starting to change in India just like it is changing here. But I only talk about India because I just talked to a lot of people recently from there kind of going through their own thing. But it's just sometimes we only see scripture from our own worldview and our own context of how we think it is now. And so today we see read these scriptures about same-sex relationships. I think there's 6 total in the entire Bible that might be referring to something like that. But it has nothing to do with how we understand same-sex relationships in the United States in the 21st century. And how we understand it in the United States in the 21st century is not even necessarily, especially in bigger cities, is not how it's understood in places around the world. And so to kind of put our cultural lens on what is written thousands of years ago is something that a lot of people, including yourself, are trying to say, hey, let's kind of think and see if this is really what they're talking about. And so, to realize that, I think whether you're in a big city or a small city or in the United States or on the other side of the world, that is why it's such a huge deal right now. And it's the thing that we're working through right now. And we've had to work through a lot of other things that we thought were very black and white through our history since the scriptures were written as well. And so I do happen to think, obviously it's extremely personal for me, but I also think it's very much one of the pressing issues of our time.
Well, it was a couple months ago when Daniel Kirk and Rick Mixon, who was like the first openly gay Baptist minister, Daniel Kirk, New Testament scholar, we did an episode of the podcast called the Clobbercast that kind of goes through all the verses that get used to for clobbering our gay and lesbian members of the body of Christ. So, and doing it in my head, I'm like, oh, this is kind of basic and not that nerdy and old hat, and that's my it'd be fun, it'd be useful. I had no idea the number of people that would send message after message about it. Like, I had calls, emails, Facebook messages of people saying stuff like, just listening to it and walking through and knowing that I can affirm myself and still affirm the faith I have of the God I encounter reading scripture as freeing. Right? And then I'll get an email from someone, who is explaining to me how that was so basic, and now we've moved on to arguing about insert things that require critical theorist degrees to know what they're talking about. They're like, well, now we're on to, queer accounts of Eucharistic bodies or some, this like super thing. And I'm like, yeah, like I actually think that would be fun to talk about. And yet the fact that you and I would like to have that conversation misses the fact that an extra 20,000 people downloaded this, and I had 300 messages from people who either like from I called my son for the first time in 10 years to wow. I got to love myself. And so I feel like one of the things that stories, more people who tell their stories and then build bridges to different parts of the church is that we have the opportunity to have the conversation wherever people are. Right. And if it takes walking through Bible verses to get around to saying you can love your gay neighbors or love yourself as a gay man, then sure, like we should do it. And if it means engaging in, different types of theorists and if you're going to the Bay Area to discuss it, which I did, and we had a very different conversation because I was the only straight person in the room. So I think that what the larger church's conversation is showing is that when you get to hear stories, when you get to hear what to some may seem like rather basic information, it actually ends up being liberating and life-giving to people who don't have other options on the table until someone puts them there. And to me, that's been one of the like things I've been most excited about for you, like deciding not just to experience it for yourself, but share it is like how many people are image bearers of God who don't believe it and yet sit in a pew every Sunday.
Yeah.
Probably feeling condemned rather than affirmed.
Yeah.
And if you think of like,
and not even the ones that sit in the pews, but to realize how many, I can't tell you how many masses of, gay people that I've met that don't sit in the pews because they don't feel loved by God, because they don't feel affirmed. And I think that's why it's important to talk about the story too.
Mm-hmm. Well,
sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. I think that's important. Like what the reason you don't have gay members at your church that are out is because they already know what you think. Right? It's not because gay people aren't Christian. I know every congregation I visit that's open and affirming has a large number of gay members. And there's a reason. It's because most churches, I don't know if it's written in invisible ink, have it on the side of their building. Please don't come here unless your closet door's locked tight. And that's just sad. But the church.
Well, there's a huge difference between, it's like a lot of those churches will try to find the most lovingly way to tell you they don't accept you for who you are. But it's like, gay people, it's not like you're living this destructive lifestyle that's destroying you or destroying somebody else, but then to be kind of told by the pastor in the church that, we still love you, but we don't really love you for who you are. We just love you in spite of who you are. Nobody wants to be a part of that kind of church. Nobody wants to be looked at that way and to feel like that they're going to get some sort of something out of that.
Well, and this is probably a congregation with divorced members. Like, there's no exegetical ambiguity. If you read the Bible, Jesus was against it. Now, I don't think that means Jesus affirmed staying in abusive marriages. It was a rather progressive stance, affirming women's rights at that time. But if you have the ability to read ancient documents and pretend they were not written in a cultural context and then impose it on your gay neighbors, you should also impose other oppressive things you find on the Bible on all your divorced friends. They're living in sin. And then they come up with weird ways around it. Like, as opposed to going, oh, in Jesus' context, this is an affirmation of the equality of the sexes and their value, blah, blah, blah. No, don't do that. Lord knows. Just come up with ways where, well, you lived in sin momentarily and then you're forgiven and now you're on your fourth marriage. Right? It's just asinine. Like it's nonsensical. And how many people, if you go to congregations, know humans who, after they have been divorced and junk hits the fan and they rework on their own self and end up establishing healthy relationships with people that before would have been their partner that didn't have one, and they're better parents afterwards. Like, I can think of thousands of people over the course of my ministry or people I've met who, through the process of the pain of divorce and working through it and stuff, have become better human beings and better parents and stuff. But if you're going to like just take the service of the text literally, then that's bad, because Jesus was very clear, and yet we reinterpret it because we know that's not, well, we got to interpret it in ways that make sense for us today, and you should probably do that for the rest of it too. Like, what you're doing the right thing when you don't exclude people that were divorced from your congregation and expect the congregation to be a place that affirms them and challenges us all to move towards greater wholeness. And
absolutely,
why couldn't we do that with everyone? It's actually pretty cool, like, to know that you could go into a building and it doesn't matter who you brought with you and how much of their life they told you yet, that they're welcomed, they're going to be affirmed and called to greater beauty and depth of living. That's you could call it good news even.
Yeah. Amen.
Well, hopefully, and one of the things I guess we should say, like, if you are, we're going to both be at Wild Goose, so if you should all think about coming and hanging out with us. I don't know if Trey's going to camp. We'll see. I mean, he's camped with me before, and I don't know how well he slept.
Oh goodness!
I'm good at snoring.
You are, but I'll be camping. I'll be there.
Well, I never know. Like, the moment when you're going to be like, look, I'm going to be in a hotel. I gotta stay clean. So
wait, being in a cabin doesn't count as camping.
No. If you have air conditioning and a shower with water above 50 degrees,
several of my gay friends tell me when they're going camping, and it's always in a cabin with air conditioning.
I think that's called
Richard,
glamping.
I know you're listening, Richard.
It's glamping.
Yeah. Glamour camping. Oh man, fantastic.
Well, so the last question is, what's next for you, and what are some ways people listening can be supportive?
Yeah. Well, what's next for me is I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm making my next album. I feel like I have a lot to write about right now and a lot to talk about. And I'm hoping that there will be a lot of awesome people that want to continue to support me in what I do. So I am going to be at Wild Goose Festival this summer. I'm also headlining Pride Fest here in Columbus in a couple of weeks, which is just an awesome emotional feeling of this new phase in my life. But there's a lot of festivals that have been amazing that really want to support me around the country and around the world. And I'll be doing everything from regular concerts to house shows to festivals, and continue to go where I'm able to make a difference. I want to keep writing songs, and I love doing that. I'm passionate about it. I hope people want to keep listening to what I sing about, and then any way I can be an advocate to continue telling my story, to help other people with what they're going through, I want to continue to do that as well. So I think that's just super important to me, and super excited to launch all that off with headlining Pride here in a couple weeks. I think it's the second biggest one in the country besides San Francisco, and over 500,000 people come to hang out. And I'm super honored to be a part of that, to give my love to so many people that have been loving to me through this process.
And what song are you going to sing at the end of the show then?
At the end of the show?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good question. I have not decided.
Well, but you've thought about the first song?
Well, yeah, a little bit, yeah. Okay. Why?
Well, I don't know. Like if I was sitting there going, "Oh, I'm playing," and there's 500,000 people there, I probably would have thought about the set list already, Trey. I
have a set list made out, but I don't feel like I'm ready to give that out yet.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I know. I hope you leave Seven Married cover on there.
What's that?
I said I hope you leave the Seven Married 3 cover on there.
There will be a Killers cover on there. I'll tell you that much.
All right. Well,
but most of the songs will be my songs.
I just had this picture of you singing "Cumbersome."
Oh my God!
Cumbersome. I
would have if I thought about it.
Yeah, I know. It's such a complicated song. I don't know if you could get it put together in time. You just tell them next year. Cumbersome.
Oh gosh!
You're like, and there's some more 1996 grunge tunes for you that you just got to be prepared.
Hey, I would throw out some Third Eye Blind. That's all I'm saying.
Do.
You want Counting Crows? I know.
I don't want to make you try to do Counting Crows. Like you don't have like any dreads.
That's true.
You'd have to work on them, though. If you had dreads and a beard,
then it'd be all right. All right.
Well, thank you for hanging out, talking, sharing, and all that kind of stuff.
Thanks for having me on. Look forward to seeing you at Wild Goose.
Oh, yeah. Boom.
This podcast is sponsored by Phillips Seminary in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a theological school that offers Christian education in service of intelligent, just, and compassionate religious and civic communities. They welcome students to a safe space for truth-seeking conversation about the Bible, Jesus, and faithful living. They have on-campus and distance learning options. Go check them out at www.wherefaithleads.com.